Welcome everyone. We are really glad you can join us for our wrap-up panel of the day. My name is Edward Roske, and I'm just going to take a moment to allow the entire team of people on our panel to introduce themselves in half a second. From the standpoint of this conference, one of the things that I really miss about in-person conferences is the opportunity just to get together and knowledge share. So we wanted to wrap up today with an opportunity to get some really great experts from the EPM, from the S-Base, from the traditional Hyperion community. People have been using this product for many years, from all different walks of life, from the customer side, from the partner side, from the Oracle side, just to get everybody together to answer a few questions on my side, but I do encourage you to ask questions on your own. So down at the bottom of your screen, there's a little thing that says Q&A. I'm told that stands for questions and answers. So for us to do the answers, we need you to do the questions. So go ahead and type in whatever your questions are, and I will field and moderate those to our awesome members of the panel. So I'm going to have each person on our panel introduce themselves. I'm going to give you 4 things that you need to come up with. So here are your 4 things. 1, remember your own name. When in doubt, look in the corner of your Zoom window. Number 2, what is your company? Number 3, what is your role and or background, if you wanted to tell us why you're qualified to be on this panel. And number 4, I want your favorite Hyperion product that no longer exists. So doesn't exist in 2020. And I'm going to go first because I want to claim the S-Base Excel added. So my name is Edward Roske. I am CEO over at interRel, or as Glenn Schwartzberg calls it, the one person who doesn't have to do anything measurable at all of interRel. By the way, if you don't want to have to ever check off things on a to-do list again, become CEO. On a related note, if you never want to be able to figure out what you've accomplished at the end of the day, become a CEO. I've been using S-Base for over 25 years, and back in 1997, founded interRel to be an S-Base consulting firm. I'll let you all in on a little bit of trivia that will only matter to you old school S-Base people. interRel's actual full name is Interdimensionally Relevant Consulting Partners Limited. That is actually our full legal geek out name, because the 6th rule of building an S-Base cube is avoid interdimensional irrelevance. And if you were going to do so, you choose an interdimensionally relevant consulting partner. Suffice to say, that name is too long to fit on a check. So we long ago shortened it to interRel. But I think that gives me at least a little bit of geek cred. So let's go over to Sarah. Sarah.
Yeah, all right.
I know you can't see her and can only see her head, but there really is a Sarah in the rest of the room.
Yeah, I'm not wearing this just because I love wearing my uniform. To be fair, I had to go find it. So previous one, you had to look. Okay, so I had to write things down just to make sure. So Sarah's OnPrem, and that is what my name says, so we're good to go there. I work for Oracle. I've been there, I guess it'll be 5 years in February, so I've been there a while. So my role there is a principal architect for the analytics and data warehousing group. We recently reorganized, so I'm specializing right now on OBIE to OAC, and also S-Base to S-Base on OCI, meaning the 19C, soon to be 21C. We can talk about that later. My background, I've been a customer, I've been a partner, and I'm an Oracle employee. And I actually really love all this Hyperion stuff, still do. So my favorite tool that is no longer there, it's not gonna be too hard to say. I loved web analysis / analyzer. That for me, that was fun, studying all of those visualizations, which hence is why I still love the analytics cloud. So no one can take that one from me, but yeah, it was web analysis.
Awesome, thank you, Sarah. Let's turn it over to Ronni. Ronni, want to introduce yourself?
Sure. Sorry, I lost the screen. I'm Ronni Tapoya. I am the Pacific Region Planning Manager at interRel. I've been working with S-Base for over 20 years. That's really sad, but it's true. And planning once it came out. Before that, we did our own planning in S-Base. I have been a consultant, and I've been a system administrator, and I'm going to be honest and say I like the consulting better because I get to be creative and solve multiple problems, and I really don't like the day-to-day. I am so thankful that there are people especially good at that because I get to make their job easier, but I get to then move on. And my favorite, I just like the name Spider-Man. So I like that. But I also liked web analysis and the add-in. So you guys took all my stuff.
Okay. Do you want to tell for the people who don't know what Spider-Man was?
I'm honest. I'm going to say I don't really. I know it was a web. It was a reporting tool. Okay, good. Take it, because I just love the name.
I know what Spider-Man is because I implemented it as a customer with George Celentano, which was one of, I think, 2 people in the world that knew how to implement that product toward the end of its lifetime. But yeah, it was basically like web analysis for Hyperion Enterprise. Poor man's version.
Well, and so the theory goes, I can't remember how ridiculously low the amount of money was, but Marvel needed money. So Hyperion went to Marvel, and this is before they got bought by Disney, and now they're, they make more money than God, or at least that's who God calls for alone. And it's something under $1 million. The number I have in my head, no quote me on it, is 500,000 for a 5-year agreement to just use the name Spider-Man and all the related imagery that went along with it. So on that note, Tony, why don't you take the opportunity to introduce yourself?
Sure. So I'm Tony Scalise. Some people might know me as FDME Guru or OI Guru. That's where you'll find me on Twitter. I'm currently with OneCloud, but I've got a long lineage in the Hyperion space. Hopefully that made sense now that I harkened back to something called Spider-Man. But I came from the customer side. I was a customer for a number of years in the Hyperion world. That's where I got my start as an administrator, and then I moved into the consulting realm. I spent well over a decade there, and I've been with OneCloud for about a year now. I'm the chief customer officer, and I see that George Cooper's on the line. He actually asked me, what the heck is a chief customer officer? So it's basically just making sure that our customers are successful with the technology. But my lineage around the EPM space is really around integration. So if you can't tell by the Twitter handle, FDME Guru, I spent a large portion of my career around that technology and trying to make sure that others knew how to use it effectively. And then, so my favorite Hyperion product that no longer exists, I guess we could go with just FDM Classic, because that doesn't exist anymore. But I was also going to say Hyperion Pillar, because that's where I really got my start in Hyperion.
Awesome. Thank you. Kyle, you want to say hi?
Yeah, sure. Hi, guys. My name is Kyle Goodfriend. I have been working in this space for probably, I don't know, since like 98, 99. I too started off as a customer and moved into consulting and currently work for Hackett, and I'm a director there. My favorite tool, it's got to be the Into Hyperion ribbon, right? It's not an Oracle product, but if I had to go Oracle, I would say I actually still miss App Manager.
That's awesome. Let's turn it over to Mike.
Yeah. Hi, everyone. Mike Melwood's here. So longtime Hyperion guy, about 25 years now. I just had my 25th anniversary. Started out as a consultant, focused on Hyperion Enterprise, which happens to be my favorite product. So especially the 32-bit, which was ahead of its time. So I actually became the product manager for a while for that version of Hyperion Enterprise. And then I was there at the birth of HFM and was one of the product managers for HFM. And now I'm a solution consultant, happily demoing our cloud applications to customers for Oracle. And like I said, Hyperion Enterprise, 32-bit, remember that? Who remembers what was the acronym for the 32-bit enterprise?
Oh, was that the ACE engine? The ACE consolidation
that was one of the
engine?
tools, yeah. It was XA, remember?
Oh, yeah, that's right.
So
yeah.
we had SE and XA. So Hyperion XA, Hyperion Enterprise XA was our 32-bit model on Windows NT. That was my favorite.
And let's have Opal bring us home. Opal.
Hello, my name's Opal and I'm a practice director at interRel Consulting. I'm actually not qualified to be on this panel, but the Oracle ACE director team keeps arguing with me about it. So I would just say that my favorite product, just to be a little bit different, although Michael Reed beat me to it in chat, which was the very first product I ever presented on at a conference, and that was Hyperion Application Link, or HAL. And from there on, I went straight to ODI. So I was a huge data integration person, Tony. Before I became more known in the planning and reporting space.
Thank you, Opal.
Hell wasn't actually a Hyperion product. It was OEM'd.
Well, if you want to be semantics here, I mean, it was Hyperion Application Link. In the name.
So I have to give credit for Oracle in terms of just not amazingly good acronyms. HAL, so we all understand, is the computer that killed people in 2001, and they thought that would make a good acronym. My personal favorite acronym of all time, though, and I can't believe I'm going to say this out loud, but it's been a long day. There was a product called Hyperion ERP Integrator, or HERPY, and I'm like, did anyone ever say it out loud? But I could never bring myself. It's like, oh, do you want 2 licenses? So you want herpes? We had some other people vote over on the panel side. Some people were voting for S-based objects, which I do fondly remember as my ability to, in Visual Basic, do drag and drop grids and charts. HVE, which is not something that's not a social disease. That was Hyperion Visual Explorer. For anybody that doesn't remember, that was a Tableau brought to you by Hyperion. And if anyone's thinking, why would they relicense Tableau? It's the other way around. Hyperion was part of a triumvirate of 3 organizations that created what is now known as Tableau. So Hyperion was essentially the software technology side. Stanford provided a lot of the development power and kind of innovation, and it was paid for by DARPA. The Defense Advanced Research Projects Agency. I'm not entirely sure whether the federal government or the military wants to map things or graph things in 5, 6, 7, 8 dimensions, but they felt that was really important. So they paid for it all, and then Stanford and Hyperion did it. With the agreement, Hyperion got to then release it as Hyperion Visual Explorer. And if you wanted that visual edition sitting against Essbase, it was called HVE, Visual Explorer. If you wanted it against anything on Earth other than Essbase, they called that Tableau. Suffice to say, Oracle did not want to own Tableau, so that agreement ended when the Oracle Hyperion side. But we have other things. People are calling out, I loved Rasa before it was MDM. I loved Upstream, before it became FDM. Essbase Web Gateway showed up a few different times, and a personal request by Trey Daniel to please make org by period an extinct concept. So enterprise pillar. I'm shocked no microcontrol lovers showed up in the chat, but
That's not true.
oh, there was around the QA side.
Yeah, Dennis did.
Very good. Thank you. That makes me happy. So we've got a few different questions coming in, but I wanted to start off with just a big picture question, and I won't call on anyone specifically unless my panel refuses to answer, but we've been going through, suffice to say, a something over the course of this year. We have been dealing with, what do you call it, COVID-19, coronavirus. Nowadays, it's just hashtag 2020 is the answer to anything that goes wrong. So think back, if you will, to January, February. There were trends that we were seeing in the EPM space. What were those trends that were happening in EPM? And if they have changed because of COVID-19 and working from home and distributed, how have those trends actually shifted? Anybody want to take a first stab at this one?
I'm never sure.
I was going to say, I can go ahead and say from an Oracle side that, and I don't speak from Essbase because I'm not on the EPM SaaS side, but there were some people who they wanted to stay more on the Essbase on premises, but I can tell you that once March, April happened and they weren't really allowed to go see the servers, that we actually had customers who said, don't talk to us about cloud, we don't care, get rid of it, and actually came back to us in April and said, tail between the legs, we need cloud, we recognize the value now, what can we do? I mean, it's that simple.
Anybody else want to add anything to that?
Yeah, I'll jump in there, Edward.
Go for it.
I think before COVID ruined the world, a lot of what I was seeing was that finance transformation was becoming a much hotter topic, particularly in the finance space. I think the advent of the cloud on both the ERP and the EPM and BI side really started to catch on as we got into the late part of 2019 and early 2020, and more organizations were starting to think about that. I think COVID obviously accelerated that because, every article you read out there now, everybody's got the bright idea that you need to be more nimble and invest in technology that supports, this constant changing business environment. Thanks for catching up, everybody. But I think that's the biggest thing I noticed.
Anybody else have anything they wanted to add?
Yep. Edward, Mike here. I'd say there's less tolerance for manual work. So kind of what Tony said, everybody wants automation. Everybody wants the apps to talk to them, talk to each other. Nobody wants to click buttons anymore. So I think, maybe it's less people available to do the work, or maybe it's work from home, but that's definitely a trend I see.
Opal, Ronni, Kyle?
I'll just throw it. Oh, sorry. You go first, Kyle.
I was just going to throw in one of the things that I hardly ever saw with more of a finance background and working on more finance implementations was, or what I just never really did much with, was supply chain. And obviously everything has been so disrupted that a lot of my clients that I've worked with in the past now want us to come back and do supply chain, just because it was so disruptive.
Ronni?
And I was just going to add also that something else that I've noticed is that customers are, so they're how should I put this? They want to do assessments to see what they can do with what they have, right? So how can I quickly start using the tools I already have to help me make better decisions based on 2020, and then use that as a launching point to get to, once things settle down, once I know where I am, we can expand. So I really like, and I noticed that people started looking to see, what do I have? What can I do with it? And what do I need to be even better and more efficient, more productive in the future?
Yeah. And along those lines, did you want to speak?
No, go for it.
I was going to say, along those lines, so I do a lot of work on narrative reporting, and I have never had as many demos as I've had since we've been in quarantine on narrative reporting. And I think we have a lot of enterprise EPM cloud customers who are looking at their tool stack, just like Ronni was saying, trying to figure out, how can I make the most of what I have, and realizing the benefits of being able to tell your financial story, especially in a black swan event like this, especially with tools like report packages and narrative reporting.
Thank you. I agree completely with all of you, which is weird because I plan on arguing with somebody. That'll happen. One thing that I have noticed just about the trends is it's less about them suddenly becoming a different trend, aside from things like working at home, full distributed close, things that we just couldn't even have imagined, 9 months ago. The trends accelerated. There's been this push, for the last 15 years towards doing things like scenario planning. And I feel like I've been preaching to people that are starting to listen, but everyone's like, we should definitely do that as soon as we finish planning for our one number. And then all of a sudden that one number is wrong. And everyone's like, oh, well, it's wrong. And I can explain why. It's like, well, maybe it would have been a good idea to go have another set of numbers. Well, we saw this massive rapid adoption of things like scenario planning, where people said, especially back in March and April, we don't know if this is a 30-day thing and it'll be gone by Easter, if it's a 1-year thing and it'll be gone when a vaccine comes out, or if it's now a way of life and what does that look like? And we have to plan for all those. So trends like scenario planning, people really wanting better information, reporting and analytics, things like profitability, especially right now when people were panicking, what stores are we going to close, who are we going to fire, and rather than just go, oh, let's just do it randomly, like maybe we should understand what's profitable. So I do think it's an acceleration of trends. I think we've all looked back when we are telling our grandkids about the days of yore that were 2020. And what we'll talk about is it's one of those inflection points, like inventing the semiconductor, or which was not my lifetime, to be clear. Creation of the semiconductor, creation of nuclear energy, or those innovations that normally come during war are coming during COVID, because there are, pressure provides amazing innovation, and just being forced to innovate. I've been told by my doctor that I have to go see him once a year so he can talk to me for 4 minutes and tell me everything's fine, and it takes like 4 hours to go do this, and you have to sit there and wait for the doctor to run behind and come see you. And telemedicine is impossible, and all of a sudden it's like, hey, we're doing telemedicine now. It's like, and I feel it's coming to the business world. It's forcing this great level of innovation. So let's talk about innovation. So we do have some consultants on the panel. I'm just curious, how have you seen consulting evolve for quarantine?
You mean other than the fact that I spend my life on Zoom?
Yes. What do you mean? Let me look down at your corner of the window and talk to you.
Yeah.
Your Brady Bunch Zoom window.
I think so, and it's funny because I've actually heard it from clients as well. So it's good that people are realizing, companies are realizing that you can be productive remotely. But it's funny, on the flip side, I've also heard now people expect me to be on the phone at 7 a.m. and 7 p.m. And they just whereas before I would stop at a desk, now I schedule 15 minutes. So I think it's finding the balance. And thankfully, being a consultant, I was already kind of used to that balance. But I do think that being remote is allowing people the freedom to be productive. It's still, I think, very cohesive. I'm in contact with my clients as much over Zoom as I was when I was in the office, sometimes more, because they check up on you more when you're on Zoom, right? Whereas they kind of leave you in that other room when you're on site. And I think that people are using technology and they're innovating technology because of it. I've noticed lots of different updates. Zoom is updating every week, and I have some clients that have homegrown systems and they're updating. So it's kind of making it more innovative in their technology to facilitate productivity in the product, right? So what are projects that we're working on? And I'm going to say I miss travel.
Yeah, I don't miss travel so much as my wife does. She keeps offering to drive me to the airport. I have nowhere to go. In terms of consulting, this is a question for anybody, and then I'll turn it over to the software people on the call to tell us how software development's changed over the last 8 months. In terms of other people that are from the consulting side of the house, have projects gotten longer, shorter, or stayed the same over the course of COVID when it comes to doing a lift and shift to the cloud or doing an EPM implementation?
So my experience has been that they've actually gotten longer. And I think just because the working remotely from the client side is so remote, no pun intended, they're just not used to it. And they immediately thought that it was going to be extremely unproductive. So they just immediately said, we got a budget for more time because we're not going to be nearly as productive as what we were. And I actually do see a lack of productivity on the client side because it's something that's new for them. And they're still trying to figure out how to manage that process.
So Kyle, just elaborating on that, if you kind of boil it down to there are some things that in consulting, we used to think we had to do in person. Like we had to do design, right? You just got to all sit around in a room and look at each other to go do it. And there's been a consulting belief that, testing is best done where you can directly interact with the person who's doing testing. Knowledge transfer is best done in person. Just pick one of those, like brainstorming. How have you seen it evolve? Like when you're, I don't know, designing a new planning system or something.
Yeah, I don't think a lot's changed. I think we're all learning new skills on sales, for instance. Because it's completely different. But I guess the one thing that I've seen a lot of trouble with is UAT and training. I think that's the piece that is most impacted right now. And I think it'll get better. I just think it's a skill set that we all have to develop and figure out. You can't do a class of 20 or 30 anymore. You got to do 5. And so I think at least the people that I'm working with are all kind of struggling with that and trying to figure out how to best manage and be productive and do that the best way we can.
Great. So one of our software people on the call, because I don't have any visibility into this, has the software development process changed, or were you all just so virtual already? It's like, oh, we didn't even notice. Sarah, Tony.
I was going to say I'm not necessarily on the development side, but
or on the sales side, because Kyle brought that one up. So in terms of pre-sales and directly interacting, how has that evolved?
It's actually it's I should say it's changing over the. I'm laughing because I'm currently figuring out a problem that we have, and it's a good problem to have, but a bad problem to have. So I can tell you that in our case, our proof of concepts, we offered them before, but not as much. Now we're really offering proof of concepts, and people are accepting them. And so for us to take the proof of concept and take like a workload, if you will, to moving maybe one OBIE dashboard to OAC, or maybe one cube over to SBase. So before we kind of do that, but not really. But now it's kind of the part of our process. And then part of our process now, we're expanding with some more information coming. So taking this, okay, with a POC, it's done, it went well, and now they want to go to production, but they take all the work that they did for the POC and use that as their production. We've always said, hey, POC to production, let's go, let's get this done. But the reality is there's some pieces in between. And so I think internally, and I don't think I'm not sharing any trade secrets because I'm the one who's trying to figure this out personally, is how do we take that POC and hand it off to a consulting partner, whether that be any person out there, not necessarily just Oracle Consulting, but any consulting company, and say, okay, here's the work that we've done with the customer that I've had my hands on the keyboard with, that customers had a keyboard with. How do we put that into production? Because the reality is we tell them like, hey, it can be really quick, but now we're finding, okay, there's a lot more to this. And it's not necessarily that we knew to ask those questions before, so we're learning to ask those questions now. And taking that from a process that might be 6 or 8 weeks, how do we make it faster and something that's reproducible? And that's kind of an open question. And I'm not ashamed to throw that out there, because I think a lot of us are learning on the fly. But on the flip side, you have the Oracle people who are pre-sales. We're not necessarily pre-sales anymore. We're pre-sales, sales, post-sales, and we stay with the life of the customer and work with them. And so for us, our hands are getting really, really dirty these days. I don't think that's bad. I actually think that's better for the customer, because we understand the process better. If we can get them, as Kyle was saying, things are taking longer. If we can shorten that process, even what it was before, then I think it's an all-around win. So it's interesting on our side, because we're starting to realize, it's funny because 6 months later, we're starting to see, okay, 6 months ago, we said we're going to do this, and here's where we are now. But I think that's natural, is that when people start doing what you asked them to do, then you start getting the information or the results that you may or may not have wanted. So we're figuring that out. And if you guys have any insight, ping me. I'm heading it up here.
Yeah, suffice to say, it's a very different world, I think, for all of us. When I had the chance to get World Series tickets, I found out they were $150 each, because they're being played in Arlington. If you told me a month ago the World Series was going to be in Arlington, Texas this year, I'd I'll take that bet. But now we're hosting the World Series, so I got 4 tickets for like $150, and I thought I will use these on a customer, because if you ever have a chance to get World Series tickets, get it, take a customer. Nobody to go. Just nobody wants to go to a World Series event. So it's like, okay, just end up reselling those. But yeah, it's not. You're right, Sarah. It's not just the sales external side that's changed. It's people's demands or expectations, how much they actually want to see as part of this. And yeah, I'm feeling the same thing. A whole lot of people want proof of concepts. They want detailed demos. We're all sitting at home. So on that note, as we recover, because I am naive enough to believe that we are going to recover from this crisis, what should our customers that are using EPM, what should they be? Maybe I'll start with Opal on this one. Maybe we'll go over to Mike next. What are the things that our customers should be paying attention to now? What should they be putting in place and doing now in order to help them as that recovery goes underway? Opal's on mute. Should we tell her?
There you go. One of the
Oh,
things
by the
that
way,
I would
if
bring up,
your final thing you needed on your EPM solutions bingo card was you're on mute, you just completed it. So congratulations, you got blackout.
it's just
Opal?
played.
Yeah.
I played that well. I would say that during quarantine, one of the things that I've also read about and noticed is that customers are losing accuracy and detail intentionally because they're trying to respond quickly and figure out what their recovery plan is. And I know that, definitely in the EPM stack, there are many tools like strategic modeling, HSF, that will help companies kind of figure out what is the next plan. And the most important thing to me, it would be the time that it takes to develop that plan, to create that strategy, and then of course the communication of that strategy. So I think the technology can enable customers here, especially if they're kind of looking at their EPM platform and trying to figure out how can we make the best use of it. I believe that that's what organizations should be working on right now.
Excellent. Mike, you want to add to that?
Yeah, I'd say, take advantage of some of the new innovations that are in the cloud that are going to take a long, long time, if ever, to get into the on-premise world. So, we're getting hit a lot on the pre-sale side with AI and machine learning. Everybody wants to talk about machine learning and how that can make their lives easier, make the numbers more accurate. And, we just released some new features in that area, and everybody wants to see demos that have those new features for auto predict and predictive planning and, Monte Carlo simulations and stuff like that. So I think taking the time now to understand those new features so that when we get back online as a society, we're ready to go and ready to, work with those new capabilities, make things quicker and more efficient. I think that would be time well spent.
Anybody else have anything they wanted to add?
Yeah, I'll add to it. I mean, I think Mike kind of touched on this a little bit earlier, but the idea of getting rid of those processes that are non-value add through automation, I think has become a much more important thing. I mean, when I think about, and Tracy McMullen and I are talking about this tomorrow in our session, shameless plug there, but what makes a project successful? Well, what also makes a project fail or not be as successful as it can? It's the things that get cut out because the business doesn't necessarily attach value to it. And so some of those things are around automation, they're around reporting because they're not sexy. Nobody thinks of them. Now, all of a sudden, people are starting to think about those things a lot more. And so I think that that's been another thing that people should think about is how can I really put this together and make this a solution as opposed to just a series of individual things that attach to individual business processes. I think people need to think more broadly about what EPM does for them and how it helps them solve business problems.
Alex, if I can quote you, because I like the question and chat that you brought up. He wanted to add something to the innovations that he's seen from the COVID side, and said he's seeing like a lot of people asking questions, getting questions from those business stakeholders, things like what confidence do we have? What confidence percentage can we attribute to this metric, as opposed to just saying, here's the number? It's like, how confident are we that's the number? How many different ways is this number derived across our business? And then his final comment was, are we really, who said we're a data-centric organization? Because we seem to just be doing all this by hunch, and that works great when things are working evenly. And then when things go out the window, you can't go with what you've always done. Because to Opal's point, this is a black swan event. And to clarify, a black swan doesn't mean it only occurs once. So I don't want to break this bad news to you, but they're not going to stop the COVID numbering at 19. Something is going to happen that is going to be a massive disruptive event. And nobody had seen a black swan until they saw the first one, but now we see black swans. So nobody had seen anything like a global pandemic this fast, and now we have it. If you ever want to go see changes in life expectancy, and there's an animation that shows it over time, and it's like slowly rising in the 1800s and gets up into the early 1900s, and all of a sudden goes plump and then back up again. And like, what in God's name happened at that point? That was 1918 and 1919 in the Spanish flu. And if I could be grateful for one thing, which is about COVID, it is that it exposed how woefully underprepared we were for something like COVID. Imagine if it was worse. Imagine if it had been Spanish flu 2.0 that had happened in 2020. So I think this has exposed a lot of things for the good and lets us prepare. So one of you brought up, I can't remember if it was Tony or Mike or Opal, that being on the cloud helps us, people are adopting the cloud, it's helping us be more nimble, it's helping us change. Just random my opinion, and just everybody give me your thoughts. Have we crossed that inflection point where there are more cloud customers than on-prem customers now, or is it still a big install base, but it's over 50%, or is it now 80-20 cloud on-prem? Anybody have any thoughts on kind of how that split looks like right now?
I think I just recently read Oracle making some type of announcement saying that they are at a point where their revenues are greater in cloud than they are in on-prem. That's just from a revenue product standpoint. In EPM.
Yeah, but is that licensing revenue, or is that support revenue and licensing revenue? I think new customers are very heavily slanted toward cloud, particularly in the enterprise planning side of the house. I still think that with over 3,000 HFM customers, yeah, that number's probably dwindled with the advent of things like OneStream and FCCS, but there's still a massive install base there. But how they count the revenue from that, they probably don't the same way they count licensing revenue. I think it really depends on the domain in which you operate. You know, if we look at profitability as an example, it's going to be heavily slanted toward the cloud with PCMCS, or what's formerly known as PCMCS. But if you look at, say, master data, and you're looking at just the Oracle stack, well, then there's probably a much bigger DRM install base out there right now than there is EDM. Now, EDM's rapidly growing, we all know that, but you know, there's a lot of organizations that have invested a lot of money into DRM and don't want to move off of it yet.
So an interesting little tidbit that that I've noticed so obviously we all know Oracle's Q4 is March, April, May. So we were very much affected. And some questions, I got some really interesting questions during this past Q4 that I had never really gotten before. But I had some customers that specifically wanted to pay more using they want to go to cloud, but they wanted to do BYOL and pay support because they put all of their Hyperion licenses, I'll just say all the EPM space, BI, all that, they wanted to keep that on the balance sheet. And so they wanted to keep that as part of their retained earnings going forward because they knew they were going to have a really crappy quarter, if not year. And they actually valued their Oracle licenses and how they evaluated them in their financials, boosted them up. And so they particularly wanted to pay more so they could look better on their balance sheet. And I'm scratching my head. It's not wrong accounting, but it's just interesting these days. And so I actually have 50-50 BYOL versus license for the customers that we've already had. New customers obviously are all cloud included, are license included, but it's just interesting how they value their licenses actually on their balance sheet.
Yeah, it's an interesting point. The whole, balance sheet for the on-prem world, income statement for the cloud-based world, and you're right. Support and training were always kind of OpEx, but depreciating the value of your software purchase and the implementation, because you could take the whole thing and you could depreciate it over time. That went on the balance sheet, but in current FASB guidance for the cloud, that's full OpEx. And I'm seeing what you're seeing, Sarah. I'm also seeing the interesting flip case. Where people are saying, I want to take that full cost and just depreciate it all the way down now. I want to do a big new cloud implementation because this year is going to suck and everyone's going to give you a mulligan. Because everyone's going to look at your numbers, and whether they are bad or whether they are really bad, you'll be able to go 2020 and people go, oh yeah, that makes sense. And then let's move on. So it's this moment, you're exactly right, Sarah. It's this weird year where weird stuff can happen and we'll all just institutionally forget about it, and in some point in the future it'll be like that. Why did the life expectancy suddenly go down and back up again? Oh yeah, Spanish flu. It'll be, why did the earnings suddenly tank? Oh yeah, 2020 COVID-19. Anybody else have any thoughts on that cloud versus on-prem and adoption, and if it says anything about the technology that we're seeing adoption in certain areas, not in others for cloud?
The only thing I ask is that Sarah move over to her right about a foot so I don't have to look at that Xavier logo.
Hey, it could be bad. She could have a Dallas Cowboys logo. Hey, I had season tickets to the Dallas Cowboys, but I was told I couldn't have Dallas Cowboys season tickets this year on account of 2020. I wanted to point out that 6 weeks into the season, the entire NFC East has 5 total wins, but we have 2 of them in Dallas. So we are leading the NFC East. So just take that, all you haters. We're going to the playoffs. We're gonna lose 73-7 in the playoffs in the first game, but we're definitely going to the playoffs.
We gave you Dalton. We gave you Dalton. Sorry about that.
Oh my gosh, how did it's like, oh, we scored a touchdown. We didn't really. They just like at that point went mercy kill. You guys can score if you want because we don't want to leave you with only a field goal. So we've got about 5 minutes left, and I want to talk towards the future. And I hate some of those questions on like, where do you think we're going to be in 5 years? Because at this point, we'd all like probably still in quarantine. So let's talk about how that future stuff is affecting us and how we realistically can see it changing. So this question I'm gonna kind of open up to everyone, and we'll go around and make sure everyone has a chance to speak. In terms of coming out of COVID, we know that the EPM world is going to change. We know that the analytics world is going to change. I'm going to ask you to zero in on a very specific thing for our closing question. Artificial intelligence, machine learning, that pivot from being human-driven, where we're all measured by the amount of labor we put into the close process or the planning process, reporting and analytics, as AI and ML, deep learning, how are they going to change the landscape of EPM and analytics? How are you already starting to see it happen? And then feel free to just extrapolate and say how that's going to be affected into 2021 and beyond. And I know that's a really broad question, so that's why I'm trying to narrow it down to just the computer-driven AI ML of how that's going to affect EPM and analytics. Who wants to get that ball rolling? And also take your opportunity to say goodbye. And unlike a debate moderator, I can press mute if anyone interrupts you.
I'll start off. I just talked about some of these concepts today in my reporting session. I was talking about the proliferation of data and how in the last 10 years, it's increased tenfold in the universe. They say universe, although we really mean world, right? But I think it's going to help us basically keep up, because once, 5G is a random, like regular thing here in the United States, that's more data at your fingertips. We need the technology to help us keep up with sorting through all that data, doing things with that data, predicting, our next action, our next move. I think we have to have it. I think it's going to become a crutch just so that we can survive in this world.
Yeah, I'm going to back on that real quick, just because something that's, I've been working on this for a while, but I think something that's become pretty paramount in the past couple of months is really our customers asking questions about multiple regression and correlation and all that. And obviously that's going to be heavier into the AI and ML, because as customers have all this data sitting in their, say, their autonomous data warehouse, whatever you may have it, they want these models to come up on top and say, okay, to get to that true intercept of what is that value that we're going to have, and all these different columns of data or whatever, which ones actually mean something versus not. Because at this point, they're like, we have too much data. We want our data to tell us what's important. And so doing that correlation analysis and also that multiple regression versus like, what are the actual factors that factor into making money versus not? Those are becoming, and to whoever said earlier about supply chain customers, really coming out. Yeah, procurement's been huge lately because they want to figure out where is that real critical X in the process.
Who else wants to add?
I'll just
go
ahead, Ronnie.
Sorry.
Ladies first.
Okay. I just want to say really, really quick, and this is because we get to say this is my opinion, but I think that definitely I agree that we're moving towards that. We're moving towards having all this data and having the data become meaningful and using the AI predictive, in the planning world, the predictive planning and auto predict. I also think that there's going to be a little resistance where there's going to be a lot of parallel, right? And it goes back to tribal knowledge versus machine learning. And then when we can see that the machine learning is learning and coming up with the answers that we would come up with, or even more accurate, better answers based on situations, then the trust will be there. I think that there's a huge push, but based on other innovations I've seen, there's just that little resistance. And once we get past that resistance, then I think I still won't go in an autonomous car because I don't want the car to reboot in the middle of my driving. But I think that people will trust better the predictions that come out based on the machine learning.
Yeah, I think that if you look 25 years into the future, then I'll turn over to Tony. I think if you look 25 years in the future, ask yourself which is more likely, whether we will say, why did we ever let the computers drive, or will we say, why did we ever let the humans drive? I feel that analytics and EPM are going to fall into that same category, where we look back and we go, why did we think that humans were good analysts? Or, why did we think that they were better at coming up with a planning number or consolidating the business or doing mundane task validation than computers actually did? Tony?
Yeah, so I think I'm going to echo exactly what Ronnie said and you said to some degree. If we think about finance and accounting, these aren't generally the parts of the business that want to adopt things, and be on the bleeding edge. So I think there will be resistance, right? I think certain organizations will be on that bleeding edge and adopt it and recognize benefits from it. They'll probably also help hone it and make it better. So I would say that overall, it's over the course of the next year, I would imagine the impact is not as substantial as Oracle would like it to be, but it might lay the foundation similar to what the cloud back in 2014 did, when PBCS first came out.
Excellent. Mike, do you want to respond about AI and ML from the Oracle standpoint?
Well, yeah, I think it's here to stay. People expect it now. We're sort of, the train has left the station. The real question for me is going to be, what does that do to the quality of the customer? So all of a sudden we're selling to people that may not be quite as educated. We've got to sell our solutions maybe to a lower standard, right? Because they're going to be hiring folks that don't necessarily need an MBA to do advanced statistical modeling, right? I think that's going to be very interesting, and we're going to have to respond to that. We're going to get a different type of person if the machines are taking up, the heavy lifting, so to speak.
Awesome. Final question. People are saying if I'm going to go on-prem and I need to do an upgrade, I just think this is a nice little technical question. What version should they go to? Any reason to go to 11.1.21, 11.1.22, 11.1.23, or just jump all the way over to 11.2 or go to the cloud? I don't know. Kyle, you want to answer? Take a stab at it and bring us home.
You're on mute, Kyle.
I'm trying to find the button. Are you talking specifically to the versions of on-prem versus cloud, or?
Yeah, on-prem versus cloud. So somebody just said, is there any logic to go to 11.1.2.1.2.3 all the way up, or .4, 11.2? What are your thoughts?
Yeah, I mean, I haven't used a ton of Essbase. I used a little bit on the cloud, and I know there were issues with it, but it's going to grow just like planning did, and those types of things. And if it's growing as fast or improving as fast as what planning did, when I go to on-prem, I feel like I'm using DOS. It's just so far behind, and all of the things that I fought going to the cloud, where I would lose control and I would lose access and this and that, maybe in 7 or 8 years or however long it's been since we've been using it, I think once or twice have I ever had an issue where that came into play. So, the loss of ownership, I mean, it's more stable beyond belief. The introduction of things like Groovy, and, you get improvements every month. And that might sound like a bad thing, but I've been doing this again on the cloud for 6 or 7 years, and I would never want to go back to on-prem personally.
I think that is an awesome note to end on. I want to say thank you to my entire panel today. Thank you, Sarah. Thank you, Tony. Thank you, Ronnie. Thank you, Mike. Thank you, Opal. Thank you, Kyle. Thank you to all of our attendees today. We had a ton of you coming in, submitting questions, some of which we were answering offline in a direct response, and a couple of them I brought up to the entire panel. We are going to have Family Feud tonight. It may be as epic as the Family Feud game that happened about a decade ago at Kscope. We'll see. I think it depends on the level of how intoxicated people are in the middle of the afternoon, but I'm not judging. We also have a key keynote tomorrow morning that I'm doing, talking about how the world of Hyperion has changed up to 2007 to 2020, and 2020 and beyond. Thank you, everybody. We are, except for Family Feud, on a wrap of day 3 of solutions, and we look forward to seeing you tomorrow.
Yay.
Thanks, everybody. Take care. Bye wave from everybody.